right now the opponents of judicial reform are saying this is the end of democracy.
Right. And of course, we see this in America also, where the hard left, progressive left will use words to mean their opposite, to use freedom to mean the opposite, democracy to mean the opposite. We just had actually a congressman today declare that the problem is that Congress has too much power, and the power needs to, not these words, but needs to vest in the hands of the FBI and the IRS. That's a horrifying idea if you believe in freedom. So the politics here seems to be that outside groups who like ginning up, and there is credible evidence that money, plenty of it, is coming from outside the state of Israel, some of it coming from the United States, some of it credibly coming from the United States government, is going to foment these street demonstrations, we'll call them. They're not quite riots, but street demonstrations. Much as we've seen sort of international influence in trying to undermine the streets of America. And there's a movement that's trying to do that here. Mm-hmm. They found allies in those who oppose this coalition and Prime Minister Netanyahu. I think those people who are going along with the statements that we've seen coming out of some former Israeli leaders, saying that the rest of the world should basically hold Israel in contempt.
Ehud Olmert has said that?
Olmert has said that, and Tzipi Livni and others, which is shocking. They're going out into other places in the world and basically saying that Israel should be ostracized and demonized and delegitimized. You know, it seems to me a very short-sighted approach to try and shatter the current coalition and then get Prime Minister Netanyahu out of office. But the damage they're doing to Israel's reputation abroad and to the coherence in civil society here seems to me just beyond compare.
Jeff, tell us about what some Supreme Court justices and judges have said about Israel's judiciary.
Sure. Over the decades, judges in America who care about the balance of powers and who care about preserving freedom and who fight judicial activism have pointed to Israel's court as by far the most egregious and aggressive grab of power. So, for example, I actually have a couple of quotes. Richard Posner, famous judge, he said, what Aaron Barak created out of whole cloth is a degree of judicial power undreamed of, even by our most aggressive Supreme Court justices. Robert Bork, the famous Robert Bork, he wrote a whole book with the chapters just dedicated to this in Israel, and he wrote that in Israel, the branch most dangerous to the political rights of the nation could be the Supreme Court. And Justice Scalia, with his usual wit, says that he reads Israeli Supreme Court decisions when I really want to be shocked and see my court isn't so bad after all. So this is a situation that judges who care about American freedom, they know this is needed.
And last question, do you also see the Biden administration weighing in on the opposition or with the opposition?
Well, we do. The president has multiple occasions spoken about it. He's put pressure on Israel. And do I believe that Joe Biden understands the details of the reforms or the internal fact that all the polls show that a majority of Israelis, a solid majority of coalition voters and opposition voters, believe some reform is needed? No, I'm sure he doesn't know that. I'm sure the people who gave him his talking points don't. But they've activated the President of the United States to put pressure as though Israel is losing its democracy. It is not.
Would you say anything but? It's actually, this is part of democracy, bringing judicial reform?
Every reform that I've seen, and I have not read through every proposed reform, exactly seeks to emulate the United States' vision of a balance of powers and checks and balances. It's not perfect because there is no constitution here. So someone's going to have a little bit power, and we have to debate, Israel, not we, Israel has to debate which powers vest in which branches. But to simply say that to discuss this, to allow the will of the people to be heard over these unelected judges who have taken all this power and are using it in this way, it's outrageous. This is to preserve democracy, not to break it.
Jeff Ballabon with the ACLJ, thanks for explaining what's going on right now here in Israel.
Thank you, Chris. It's always a pleasure to be with you and CBN.